What really happens when you die? It's the question that has haunted humanity since the dawn of consciousness. The question that keeps us awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering about the great unknown that awaits each of us. Tonight, we're going to explore what modern science reveals about this ancient mystery. We'll journey together through research that's both fascinating and deeply comforting. Discoveries that challenge everything we thought we knew about death and dying. So settle in, breathe slowly, and let's discover what lies beyond the final heartbeat. We'll move calmly, step by step, through territories that science is only now beginning to map. This isn't a journey into fear or darkness, but into wonder, hope, and possibilities more beautiful than our ancestors dared to imagine. For centuries, death has been the ultimate mystery, the final frontier that no living person could explore and return to tell the tale. But that's changing. Modern medicine, advanced brain monitoring, and rigorous scientific investigation are giving us unprecedented glimpses into what happens when consciousness approaches the threshold between life and death. What we're discovering is reshaping our understanding of human existence itself. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, you can like and subscribe or share a thought in the comments below. And for now, all you need to do is relax and allow your mind to soften as we embark on this fascinating journey. Imagine floating in the vast silence of deep space, surrounded by billions of stars, slowly pulsing with ancient light. Time moves differently here, stretching and flowing like honey through infinite darkness. In this cosmic silence, death doesn't feel like an ending. It feels like a transition, like stepping from one room into another, larger room, filled with infinite possibilities. This is where science is taking us tonight. Not to cold, sterile answers, but to discoveries that feel almost mystical in their beauty. Picture yourself drifting peacefully through this exploration. Each fact we uncover, like a gentle star, appearing in the darkness of the unknown. Let your mind relax as we begin this journey together. The human brain weighs about 3 pounds, contains roughly 86 billion neurons, and somehow creates the miracle we call consciousness. Each neuron connects to thousands of others, forming a network more complex than all the computers on Earth combined. Yet this 3-pound universe of tissue and electricity generates everything you've ever experienced. Every memory, every emotion, every moment of love or wonder or fear. But what happens to that miracle when the brain begins to shut down? What happens to consciousness when the neural networks that support it start to fade? Recent studies are revealing something extraordinary, something that challenges everything we thought we knew about death and dying. Consider this. Every atom in your body was forged in the nuclear furnaces of dying stars. The carbon in your cells, the oxygen you breathe, the iron in your blood, all of it has been recycling through the cosmos for billions of years. You are literally made of stardust, temporarily organized into the miracle of conscious awareness. But when your current form changes, when your heart stops beating and your brain waves flatten, what happens to the pattern, the information, the essence that makes you uniquely you? This question has driven human inquiry since we first became aware of our own mortality. Tonight, we'll explore what cutting-edge science is revealing about this most fundamental mystery. We'll journey through research that's both rigorous and hopeful, Discoveries that suggest death might not be the end of consciousness, but perhaps its greatest transformation, the biology of dying. When the brain lets go, when the heart stops beating, something remarkable begins to unfold in the brain. Within seconds, oxygen levels drop dramatically, but instead of simply shutting down, like a computer, losing power, the brain enters what scientists call a cascade state. This isn't the gradual fading we might expect, but an intense neurochemical symphony that may represent the most vivid moments of consciousness in an entire lifetime. Neurotransmitters flood the system in concentrations never seen during normal life. Serotonin, the molecule of contentment and well-being, surges through neural pathways. Dopamine, associated with pleasure and reward, reaches levels far beyond anything experienced during peak moments of joy. And then there's something even more mysterious: the potential release of dimethyltryptamine, DMT, often called the spirit molecule. Dr. Rick Strassman, a psychiatrist and researcher at the University of New Mexico, spent years studying DMT and its effects on human consciousness. He discovered that our brains naturally produce this powerful psychoactive compound, and he theorized that during the dying process, we might experience the most intense DMT release of our entire lives. This could explain why so many people report feelings of profound peace, encounters with otherworldly beings, and experiences of unconditional love during their final moments. But here's what's truly fascinating, and what challenges our basic assumptions about consciousness and death. Studies using advanced brain monitoring equipment, including EEG machines that can detect the faintest electrical activity, show that even after the heart stops completely, neural activity can continue for several minutes. Sometimes this activity isn't just present, it's more intense and organized than during normal waking consciousness. Dr. Jim O'Borgigan at the University of Michigan made a groundbreaking discovery when studying the brains of rats during cardiac arrest. She found that immediately after the heart stopped, there was a surge of electrical activity in the brain that exceeded levels found in the normal waking state. The neural networks lit up with activity precisely when oxygen levels were at their lowest, when the brain should theoretically be shutting down. If similar processes occur in human brains, and there's every reason to believe they do, it means that the dying brain doesn't fade quietly into unconsciousness. Instead, it may be experiencing the most vivid, intense consciousness of its entire existence, like a final symphony played at maximum volume before the orchestra falls silent, or like a star burning its brightest in the moments before it transforms into something entirely new. This hyperactivity in the dying brain could explain the extraordinary vividness that people report during near-death experiences. Rather than consciousness dimming as we approach death, it might actually intensify, accessing normally dormant capabilities and revealing aspects of reality that are filtered out during ordinary awareness. The implications are staggering. If the brain becomes more active, not less active, as it approaches death, then the experiences people report from the threshold between life and death. Death might not be diminished hallucinations, but enhanced perceptions of reality. The dying brain might be like a radio, suddenly receiving signals from frequencies it could never detect during normal operation. Consider what this means for our understanding of consciousness itself. We tend to think of awareness as something that gradually emerges from brain complexity and then fades as the brain deteriorates. But what if consciousness is more like a signal that the brain receives and processes, rather than something the brain generates? What if death represents not the end of the signal, but the removal of the filters that normally constrain our perception of it? Let's pause here for a moment. Take a breath. What we've just discovered about the dying brain changes everything we thought we knew about death. Instead of fading quietly, consciousness might actually intensify in those final moments. If you've ever been with someone as they passed away, you may have witnessed this yourself. That sense of presence, of something profound happening that medical science couldn't quite explain. Now we're beginning to understand why. These questions bring us to one of the most remarkable areas of death research: the systematic study of near-death experiences and what they reveal about the nature of consciousness, death, and possibly what lies beyond near-death experiences. The most studied mystery. Nearly 15% of people who come close to death report experiences that defy our understanding of reality. They describe traveling through tunnels of brilliant light, meeting deceased relatives who appear younger and more vibrant than they ever did in life, and encountering beings of pure love and wisdom that communicate through direct thought transmission rather than words. For decades, mainstream science dismissed these accounts as hallucinations of a dying brain, desperate attempts by failing neural networks to make sense of trauma and oxygen deprivation. But then researchers started paying closer attention, applying rigorous scientific methods to phenomena that had previously been relegated to the realm of anecdote and folklore. What they discovered has revolutionized our understanding of consciousness, death, and the relationship between mind and brain. Dr. Pim van Lommel, a Dutch cardiologist, conducted one of the most comprehensive studies of near-death experiences ever undertaken, working with multiple hospitals over nearly 2 decades. He and his team studied over 300 patients who had suffered cardiac arrest. These weren't people who were merely unconscious or in danger, but individuals who were clinically dead, with no heartbeat, no blood pressure, and no measurable brain activity. What van Lommel discovered changed everything. Patients with completely flat electroencephalograms, showing no electrical activity in their brains, were returning with vivid, detailed memories of their resuscitation efforts. They could describe conversations between doctors and nurses, medical procedures performed on their bodies, even events that occurred in other rooms of the hospital while they were supposedly unconscious. One patient accurately described a nurse removing and then replacing his dentures during the resuscitation process, something that should have been impossible for an unconscious person to perceive. Another described watching her own surgery from a position near the ceiling, providing details about the surgical instruments used and conversations between medical staff that were later verified as accurate. These cases of veridical perception, where patients report accurate information about events that occurred during their period of clinical death, provide some of the strongest evidence that consciousness can function independently of measurable brain activity. How can someone with no detectable neural activity perceive, process and remember complex events occurring around their unconscious body. Consider the famous case of Pam Reynolds, whose experience has become legendary in consciousness research. Reynolds, a singer and songwriter from Georgia, was diagnosed with a massive brain aneurysm that threatened her life. The only surgical procedure that could save her required something called hypothermic cardiac arrest, one of the most extreme medical procedures ever developed. During the operation, Reynolds' body temperature was lowered to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Her heart was stopped completely, and all blood was drained from her brain. EEG monitors showed no electrical activity in her brain, and auditory evoked potentials confirmed that her brainstem was completely non-functional. By every medical and scientific definition, Pam Reynolds was dead. Yet during this period of complete clinical death, Reynolds reported one of the most detailed and verified near-death experiences on record. She described watching her own surgery from above, accurately detailing the specialized surgical instruments used, including a bone saw that she said looked like an electric toothbrush and made an unusual sound. She recounted conversations between surgeons about the condition of her blood vessels and described how they had to move the surgery from one side of her head to the other. All of these details were later verified by the surgical team. Reynolds had no prior knowledge of the specific instruments or procedures involved in her surgery, and she was under complete anesthesia, with her eyes taped shut throughout the operation. The auditory monitors confirmed that she couldn't have heard the conversations she described, yet she returned from clinical death with memories more vivid and detailed than most people have of normal waking experiences. But Reynolds' experience went far beyond veridical perception of her surgery. She described traveling through a tunnel toward a brilliant light, meeting deceased relatives, including her grandmother, and encountering beings of light who communicated with her through what she described as pure knowledge transfer. She was told that her work on Earth wasn't finished and that she needed to return to her body, though she felt reluctant to leave what she experienced as a realm of unconditional love and perfect understanding. The consistency of these experiences across different cultures, ages, and belief systems is remarkable. Dr. Raymond Moody, who coined the term near-death experience in the 1970s, has collected thousands of accounts from around the world. A child in rural Japan describes the same tunnel of light and encounters with deceased relatives as a physicist in Boston. A lifelong atheist reports the same overwhelming sense of love and connection as a devout religious believer. This cross-cultural consistency suggests that we are not dealing with cultural conditioning, wishful thinking, or religiously influenced hallucinations, but with something fundamental about the nature of consciousness itself. These experiences seem to reveal territories of awareness that exist independently of cultural background or personal beliefs. The AWARE study, led by Dr. Samparnia at New York University, represents the largest and most rigorous scientific investigation into what happens when we die, using advanced resuscitation techniques that can bring people back from increasingly profound states of clinical death. Researchers are able to study consciousness at the very threshold between life and death. The study involves placing images on high shelves in cardiac units, visible only from above, to test whether patients who report out-of-body experiences can actually perceive their surroundings from an elevated position, while results are still being analyzed and published. Preliminary findings suggest that some patients can indeed accurately report details they shouldn't have been able to see from their physical position on the operating table. Dr. Parnia explains that the brain typically shuts down within 10 to 20 seconds of cardiac arrest, yet people are returning with vivid, coherent memories of experiences that supposedly occurred while their brains were inactive. These aren't vague impressions or fragmented dreams that might occur during the transition in or out of consciousness. They are detailed, life-changing encounters with what many describe as ultimate reality. Perhaps even more remarkable are the long-term effects of these experiences on the people who have them. Dr. Bruce Grayson, a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia, who has studied near-death experiences for over 4 decades, has documented consistent patterns of psychological change in those who return from the threshold of death. Near-death experiences lose their fear of dying almost entirely, not because they've convinced themselves intellectually that death isn't so bad, but because they've directly experienced a reality beyond physical existence that they describe as more real, more beautiful, and more loving than anything they've encountered in ordinary life. They become significantly more compassionate, often making dramatic career changes to focus on helping others. Many develop enhanced intuitive abilities and report feeling permanently connected to something greater than themselves. These aren't temporary emotional responses to a traumatic medical event. Studies following near-death experiences for decades show that these psychological changes persist and often deepen over time. Whatever these people experienced during their clinical death fundamentally altered their understanding of reality and their place within it. The cosmic perspective, energy that never dies. Let's step back for a moment and consider what physics tells us about energy, information, and the fundamental nature of reality itself. Einstein's famous equation, E equals mc squared, revealed that matter and energy are interchangeable, 2 aspects of the same underlying reality. More profoundly, his work showed us that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed from one state to another. This principle of energy conservation is one of the most fundamental laws of physics, verified countless times, and forming the basis for our understanding of everything from stellar nuclear fusion to the quantum vacuum fluctuations that permeate empty space. Energy is eternal, constantly changing form, but never disappearing from the universe. The atoms that make up your body right now have been part of countless other forms throughout cosmic history. The carbon in your cells was forged in the nuclear furnaces of massive stars that lived and died billions of years ago. The oxygen you breathe was created when those ancient stars exploded in supernovae, seeding the cosmos with heavy elements. The iron in your blood was synthesized in stellar cores under pressures and temperatures that dwarf anything we can create on Earth. You are literally made of stardust, cosmic recycling at its most elegant. Every atom in your body has been part of stars and planets, oceans and mountains, countless plants and animals throughout Earth's long history. The matter that forms you is ancient beyond imagination, yet the pattern, the organization, the specific arrangement that creates your unique consciousness is utterly unprecedented in the history of the universe. But what about the information that makes you uniquely you? Your memories, your personality, the complex web of experiences and relationships that constitute your individual consciousness. If matter and energy are conserved, what happens to information when the biological systems that process it cease to function? This question brings us to one of the most fascinating frontiers in modern physics: the relationship between consciousness, information, and the quantum mechanical foundations of reality. Some of the world's leading physicists are beginning to explore the possibility that consciousness itself might be a fundamental feature of the universe, like gravity or electromagnetism, rather than something that emerges from the complex organization of matter. Dr. Stuart Heimeroff, an anesthesiologist and consciousness researcher at the University of Arizona, has collaborated with Sir Roger Penrose, one of the world's most respected mathematical physicists, to develop what they call orchestrated objective reduction theory, or OR. Their proposal suggests that consciousness arises from quantum processes occurring within the microtubules of brain cells, structures so small they operate according to quantum rather than classical physical principles. According to their theory, consciousness isn't produced by the electrical and chemical activity of neurons, which is what mainstream neuroscience assumes, but by quantum computations occurring within the structural framework of brain cells themselves. If they're correct, it means that consciousness operates according to quantum mechanical principles, which follow very different rules than the classical physics that governs our everyday experience. In the quantum world, information can exist in multiple states simultaneously. Particles can be instantaneously connected across vast distances through quantum entanglement, and the act of observation plays a fundamental role in determining what becomes real. If consciousness operates according to quantum principles, it might not be constrained by the classical limitations that bound our physical bodies. Heimeroff and Penrose propose that when brain activity ceases, the quantum information that constituted our consciousness doesn't simply disappear, but returns to what they call the quantum vacuum, the seething sea of virtual particles and fluctuating energy fields that underlies all physical reality. In this quantum realm, information might persist in ways we are only beginning to understand, potentially maintaining its coherent structure indefinitely. This isn't just speculative philosophy. Recent discoveries in quantum biology have shown that quantum effects play crucial roles in biological processes previously thought to be purely classical. Photosynthesis, the process by which plants convert sunlight into energy, relies on quantum coherence to achieve efficiencies that classical physics says should be impossible. Birds use quantum entanglement in their navigation systems to detect the Earth's magnetic field. Even the sense of smell appears to depend on quantum mechanical effects. If quantum phenomena are active in these fundamental biological processes, it's not unreasonable to consider that consciousness itself might have quantum aspects that could persist beyond the death of the biological systems that normally host them. Dr. Henry Stapp, a quantum physicist at the University of California, Berkeley, has spent decades exploring the role of consciousness In quantum mechanics, he argues that consciousness plays a fundamental role in the collapse of quantum wave functions, the process by which multiple quantum possibilities become single, definite outcomes. In his view, consciousness isn't produced by physical processes, but is actually necessary for physical reality to take on definite form. If Stapp is correct, then consciousness is woven into the very fabric of reality at the most fundamental level, rather than being a late emerging property of complex biological systems. Consciousness might be present from the quantum ground up, expressing itself through physical structures, but not dependent on them for its existence. These quantum considerations suggest that consciousness might exist in a realm where time and space function very differently than in our everyday experience. This could explain the timeless quality that many near-death experiences report, where an entire lifetime review occurs in moments, or where encounters with deceased loved ones feel more real and immediate than ordinary waking life. Quantum mechanics also reveals that the universe is far more interconnected than our classical intuitions suggest. Quantum entanglement demonstrates that particles can be instantaneously correlated across any distance, maintaining connections that transcend the limitations of space and time. If consciousness has quantum aspects, it might participate in this fundamental interconnectedness, able to access information and experiences beyond what our isolated biological brains can normally perceive. Perhaps most remarkably, some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that consciousness might not be produced by the brain, but rather focused through it, like light passing through a lens. In this view, the brain acts as a kind of biological antenna, receiving and processing signals from a larger field of consciousness that permeates reality. When the antenna breaks down, the signal doesn't disappear. It simply can't be received and processed in the same way. This quantum perspective on consciousness opens possibilities that materialist neuroscience simply cannot accommodate. If awareness is fundamental to reality, rather than emergent from brain chemistry, then its survival of physical death becomes not miraculous, but natural, as inevitable as the conservation of energy or the persistence of information in the quantum vacuum. The Life Review: Understanding Our Cosmic Impact. One of the most consistent and profound elements of near-death experiences is what researchers call the life review. During the brief moments of clinical death, people report experiencing their entire existence in vivid detail, but not in the linear, chronological way we normally remember our lives. Instead, they describe experiencing every moment simultaneously, understanding the interconnected web of causes and effects that flowed from their choices and actions throughout their lifetime. But this isn't just passive memory, like watching a movie of your life unfold. Near-death experiences consistently report that during the life review, they experience every moment from multiple perspectives simultaneously. They feel their own experiences as they originally lived them, but they also experience those same moments from the perspective of everyone they affected. They feel the joy they brought to others and the pain they caused, understanding with perfect clarity the ripple effects of every choice they made. Sarah, one of Dr. Kenneth Ring's research participants, described her life review as experiencing every act of kindness and cruelty simultaneously, feeling the happiness she had created in others and the suffering she had caused not as judgment or punishment, but as pure understanding. She said it was like seeing her entire life from a cosmic perspective, understanding how every interaction contributed to the learning and growth of all the consciousnesses involved. What's remarkable about these accounts is that this comprehensive life review occurs during cardiac arrest, when the brain's memory centers should be completely inactive. The hippocampus, which is essential for memory formation and retrieval, is one of the first brain structures to shut down when oxygen is depleted. Yet people are returning from clinical death with memories more detailed and comprehensive than anything they've ever experienced during normal consciousness. This suggests that memory, like consciousness itself, might extend far beyond the physical structures of the brain. If accurate, it means that every moment of our lives, every choice we make, every person we touch, creates lasting patterns in the fabric of reality that persist even after the neural networks that normally process memory have ceased to function. The life review revealed something profound about the nature of existence and our place within it. Rather than being isolated, individuals struggling alone through life, we appear to be intimately connected to everyone we encounter, creating a web of mutual influence and shared experience that extends far beyond what we normally perceive. This aligns remarkably with discoveries in quantum physics about the fundamental interconnectedness of reality. Quantum entanglement demonstrates that particles can share correlated states instantaneously across any distance, maintaining connections that transcend the normal limitations of space and time. John Stuart Bell's theorem proved mathematically that no physical theory based on local hidden variables can reproduce all the predictions of quantum mechanics, meaning that reality at its foundation is non-locally connected. If consciousness participates in this quantum interconnectedness, then our actions and choices might create ripples through the fabric of existence in ways we can barely imagine. While limited to ordinary awareness, the life review might be revealing the true scope of these connections, showing us how deeply interwoven all consciousness really is. Many near-death experiences report that during the life review, they understood that every act of genuine love and kindness creates lasting positive effects that extend far beyond the immediate situation, while every act of cruelty or selfishness creates suffering that ripples outward through the interconnected web of consciousness. But they consistently emphasize that this understanding came without judgment or condemnation. Instead, they felt embraced by unconditional love, even as they witnessed their most shameful moments. It's as if the universe itself operates not on judgment and punishment, but on education and growth. The life review appears to be a natural process of understanding and integration, helping consciousness comprehend the full scope of its impact and learn from its experiences. People often describe feeling that every mistake, every failure, every moment of suffering served a purpose in their spiritual development and in the evolution of consciousness itself. Dr. Kenneth Ring has studied hundreds of life review accounts and notes their consistency across different cultural backgrounds, ages, and belief systems. Whether the person is a devout Christian, a secular humanist, or someone from an entirely different religious tradition, the life review follows similar patterns and conveys similar messages about the importance of love, compassion, and spiritual growth. This suggests that if the life review is real, it reveals something universal about the nature of consciousness and moral reality that transcends cultural conditioning or religious indoctrination. It points toward what might be called cosmic ethics, principles of right action that emerge from the fundamental structure of consciousness itself, rather than from human cultural traditions. Let me share something that might bring comfort. If you've ever lost someone you love, the life review reveals that every moment of genuine connection, every act of kindness, every instance of love shared between consciousnesses creates ripples that extend far beyond what we can see. Those you've loved and lost may be more present in your life than you realize. The implications for how we should live our lives are profound. If every action creates lasting effects that we'll eventually experience from all perspectives involved, then treating others with kindness and compassion isn't just morally admirable, but practically wise. If consciousness is interconnected at levels we normally don't perceive, then serving the well-being of others serves our own well-being in the deepest possible sense. Advanced research and emerging discoveries, the scientific investigation of consciousness and death is accelerating rapidly, driven by advances in brain imaging technology, resuscitation medicine, and quantum physics. Researchers around the world are developing increasingly sophisticated methods for studying what happens to awareness when the brain approaches the threshold between life and death. Dr. Sam Parnia's AWARE study, which we mentioned earlier, represents just the beginning of this new scientific frontier. The study involves placing hidden images in cardiac units where only someone having an out-of-body experience would be able to see them. But the research goes much deeper than testing whether consciousness can perceive from outside the physical body. Advanced brain monitoring equipment now allows researchers to track neural activity with unprecedented precision during the dying process. They're discovering that the brain doesn't shut down uniformly during cardiac arrest, but shows complex patterns of activity that vary between different regions and different individuals. Some areas of the brain remain active much longer than previously thought possible, while others show sudden surges of activity at the moment of cardiac arrest. These findings are revolutionizing our understanding of what it means to be unconscious or clinically dead. The binary distinction between conscious and unconscious, alive and dead, is giving way to a more nuanced understanding of consciousness as existing on a spectrum that may extend far beyond what we can currently measure with our instruments. Dr. Parnia has documented cases where people report continuous awareness during periods of cardiac arrest lasting several hours. These individuals describe experiencing time very differently than measured by hospital clocks, often feeling that they lived through days or even years of experience during brief periods of clinical death. This suggests that consciousness might operate according to different temporal principles when freed from the constraints of brain-based processing. The implications extend far beyond individual cases. If consciousness can persist for extended periods without measurable brain activity, it challenges our fundamental assumptions about the relationship between mind and brain. It suggests that consciousness might be more independent of neural activity than mainstream neuroscience assumes. Advances in quantum biology are also shedding new light on the possible mechanisms by which consciousness might survive physical death. Researchers have discovered that quantum effects are much more prevalent in biological systems than previously suspected. The efficiency of photosynthesis, the accuracy of DNA replication, the sensitivity of vision and smell all appear to depend on quantum mechanical processes that operate at body temperature in wet, noisy biological environments where classical physics says quantum effects should be impossible. Dr. Michu Fischer, a physicist at UC Santa Barbara, has proposed that quantum processing in the brain might depend on phosphorus nuclei, which have quantum properties that could be preserved for hours or even days in biological systems. If consciousness does have quantum aspects, these phosphorus-based quantum memories might provide a mechanism for information storage that persists beyond normal neural activity. Meanwhile, research into the quantum properties of microtubules, the structural ailments within brain cells that Hameroff and Penrose identified as possible sites of consciousness, continues to reveal surprising quantum behaviors. These cellular structures appear capable of maintaining quantum coherence at biological temperatures, supporting the possibility that consciousness operates through quantum rather than purely classical mechanisms. The convergence of quantum physics, neuroscience, and consciousness research is opening entirely new possibilities for understanding what happens when we die. Rather than consciousness simply switching off like a computer, it might transition into quantum states where different physical laws apply, where information persists in forms we're only beginning to understand, and where the normal constraints of space and time no longer limit experience. Children's past life memories, evidence for continuity. Some of the most compelling evidence for consciousness survival comes from an unexpected source. Young children who report detailed memories of previous lives. Dr. Jim Tucker at the University of Virginia has spent over 2 decades investigating cases of children, often barely old enough to speak, who provide specific information about people they claim to have been in previous lifetimes. These aren't vague impressions or general statements that could apply to many situations. The children provide names, addresses, family details, occupations, and specific events that can be independently verified. What makes these cases particularly remarkable is that the children often have no apparent way of accessing the information they report, especially when it concerns people who lived in distant locations or died before the child was born. Consider the case of James Leininger, who began experiencing nightmares about plane crashes when he was barely 2 years old. He would wake up screaming about his plane being on fire and being unable to escape. As James grew older and his vocabulary developed, he provided increasingly specific details about his claimed previous life as a World War II fighter pilot. James said his plane had taken off from a ship called the Natoma, that he had been shot down by the Japanese, and that he had a friend named Jack Larson, who was also a pilot. He knew technical details about World War II aircraft that seemed impossible for a young child to have learned through normal channels. Most remarkably, he identified himself as James Houston, a pilot who had indeed served on the USS Natoma Bay and been killed when his plane was shot down. over the Pacific in 1945. When researchers investigated James's claims, they found that virtually every verifiable detail was accurate. James Houston had served on the Natoma Bay, had been shot down in the location and manner young James described, and had indeed served alongside a pilot named Jack Larson. The child even knew details about the specific type of aircraft Houston flew and the modifications that had been made to that particular plane. Dr. Tucker has documented over 2,500 similar cases from around the world. While reincarnation is commonly accepted in many Eastern cultures, these cases occur across all cultural backgrounds, including families that have no belief in previous lives and are often disturbed by their children's claims. What's particularly striking is that many of these children have birthmarks or birth defects that correspond to wounds that killed the person they claim to have been. Dr. Ian Stevenson, Tucker's predecessor at the University of Virginia, documented hundreds of cases where birthmarks matched autopsy reports or medical records from the claimed previous personality. One child had a birthmark on his chest that perfectly matched the entry wound of a bullet that killed a man the child claimed to have been. Another child, born with underdeveloped fingers, on one hand claimed to have been a man whose fingers were cut off in an accident, details that were later verified through medical records. The correspondence between these physical markings and documented injuries from claimed previous lives is remarkable and difficult to explain through conventional means. These cases suggest that some aspect of consciousness, along with associated memories and even physical information, might persist beyond the death of one body and somehow imprint itself on a new biological system. If accurate, they provide evidence that death represents not the end of individual consciousness, but a transition into a new form of existence. The children typically stop talking about their previous lives as they grow older and become more integrated into their current identities. This pattern suggests that whatever mechanism allows access to previous life memories becomes less active as normal brain development proceeds, and the child becomes more firmly established in their current incarnation. Dr. Tucker notes that the strongest cases typically involve individuals who died traumatically or had strong emotional attachments that might create what he calls unfinished business. This mirrors reports from near-death experiences where people are told they must return to complete important tasks or relationships in their physical lives. While reincarnation remains controversial in Western scientific circles, the mounting evidence from children's cases deserves serious consideration. The information these children provide is often so specific and accurate that conventional explanations like cryptomnesia, forgotten memories of information encountered earlier, or fraud become increasingly difficult to maintain. If consciousness can indeed survive the death of one biological system and express itself through another, it fundamentally changes our understanding of what death means. Rather than the termination of individual awareness, death might represent a transition between different forms of conscious existence, like an actor finishing one role and taking on another, while maintaining their essential identity and accumulated experience. The transformative impact, how death studies change lives. Perhaps the most compelling evidence for the reality of consciousness. Survival comes not from laboratory measurements or verified perceptions, but from the profound and lasting changes that occur in people who have encountered these phenomena directly, whether through near-death experiences, past life memories, or even deep involvement in consciousness research. Exposure to evidence for survival consistently transforms how people understand themselves and their place in the universe. Dr. Bruce Grayson, who has studied near-death experiences for over 4 decades, has documented remarkably consistent patterns of psychological change in those who return from the threshold of death. These aren't subtle shifts in attitude or temporary emotional responses to trauma. They're fundamental alterations in personality, values, and worldview that persist for decades and often intensify over time. Near-death experiences lose their fear of death almost entirely, not through intellectual conviction or philosophical reasoning, but through direct, experiential knowledge of what lies beyond physical existence. They describe this not as belief, but as knowing, the same way they know the sun rises in the east, or that water is wet. It's immediate, certain, and unshakable. This transformation goes far beyond reduced death anxiety. People return with dramatically increased compassion, often making major life changes to focus on helping others rather than pursuing material success. They report enhanced intuitive abilities, increased creativity, and a deep sense of connection to all life that fundamentally alters how they interact with the world. Many describe developing what researchers call expanded consciousness, an ongoing awareness of dimensions of reality that most people never perceive. They often become sensitive to subtle energies, report enhanced psychic abilities, and maintain a sense of connection to the realm of love and light they encountered during their near-death experience. Dr. Kenneth Ring found that these changes persist and often deepen over time. Follow-up studies conducted decades after people's near-death experiences show that the transformative effects don't fade, but continue to influence every aspect of their lives. These individuals consistently report that their brief encounter with death was the most important experience of their lives, more significant than marriage, career success, or any other major life event. The consistency of these transformations across thousands of cases provides compelling evidence that people are encountering genuine aspects of expanded reality during their near-death experiences, not merely hallucinating or imagining their encounters with otherworldly realms. Take a moment to let this settle in your awareness. We've journeyed through neuroscience and quantum physics, through documented cases and research studies, all pointing toward the same remarkable possibility that consciousness might be far more eternal than we ever dared hope. But the transformative power extends beyond those who have direct personal experiences. Researchers who spend years studying consciousness and death phenomena often report their own profound changes in worldview and life priorities. Dr. Pim van Lommel describes how his decades of near-death experience research completely transformed his understanding of consciousness and reality, leading him to develop entirely new theoretical frameworks for understanding the relationship between mind and brain. Even people who simply study these phenomena as interested observers frequently report significant changes in their fear of death, their sense of life's meaning, and their understanding of human potential. There seems to be something inherent in seriously contemplating the possibility of consciousness survival that opens new perspectives on existence and human possibilities. This suggests that whether or not consciousness actually survives death, engaging deeply with the question itself holds transformative power. It challenges our materialist assumptions about the nature of reality and opens us to possibilities that can fundamentally enrich our understanding of what it means to be human. Science may never have a final, definitive answer to the mystery of death, but it's revealing something beautiful and profound about the nature of consciousness and human existence. The evidence we've explored tonight suggests that awareness is far more than brain chemistry, that death might be transformation rather than termination, and that the love and growth we experience in physical life echo through dimensions we can barely imagine. Let me tell you a story that brings this all together. Imagine a wave in the vast ocean, dancing with sunlight, feeling unique and separate from all the other waves around it. The wave believes that when it crashes against the shore, it will simply disappear, cease to exist. But what the wave doesn't understand is that it was never separate from the ocean at all. It was always part of something infinite and eternal. When the wave returns to the ocean, it doesn't disappear. Instead, it remembers what it always was. Part of the endless, dancing sea of existence. The wave's unique pattern. Its individual dance with sunlight. That experience becomes part of the ocean's eternal memory. Perhaps this is what death truly represents. Not an ending, but a remembering of what we always were. The scientific evidence suggests that consciousness, like the ocean itself, might be the fundamental fabric of reality, temporarily expressing itself through individual biological forms, but never truly separate from the infinite field of awareness that permeates all existence. Think of a caterpillar entering its chrysalis from the outside. It appears to be dying, dissolving completely, but hidden within that apparent death, something magnificent is taking shape. The caterpillar's entire structure transforms, and what emerges is not a restored caterpillar, but a butterfly with capabilities the caterpillar could never have imagined. The atoms that form your body right now have been part of countless other forms throughout cosmic history. They've been part of stars and planets, oceans and mountains, countless plants and animals. You are literally made of stardust, temporarily organized into the miracle of conscious awareness. When your current form changes, those atoms will continue their cosmic dance. But what about the pattern, the information, the consciousness that makes you uniquely you? The research we've explored tonight suggests that this essence, this fundamental awareness that experiences and learns and loves, might be as eternal as the energy that powers the stars. Not because we wish it to be so, but because consciousness appears to be woven into the very fabric of reality itself. If you've ever looked up at the night sky and felt a sense of profound connection, if you've ever experienced a moment of love so deep it seemed to touch eternity, if you've ever had an intuition that there's more to existence than what meets the eye, the science we've explored suggests you might have been perceiving something real about the nature of consciousness and your place in the cosmic story. As we come to the end of tonight's journey into the great mystery, let these possibilities settle gently in your awareness like snow falling on still water. Science is revealing that death might not be the end of consciousness, but a doorway into expanded states of awareness beyond our current imagination, whether consciousness continues beyond death or not. The very fact that you can contemplate such questions, that you can love and wonder about your place in the cosmic story, is itself a profound miracle. You are stardust that became aware of itself, a temporary arrangement of atoms that can ponder infinity and experience beauty, the love you share, the kindness you show, the growth you experience. All of it might echo through dimensions of reality we can barely conceive. Every moment of genuine connection you create, every act of compassion, every instance of wonder and appreciation, these might be contributing to something far grander than we can imagine, while bound by physical limitations. Rest peacefully tonight, knowing that you are part of something magnificent and mysterious. The evidence suggests that what makes you uniquely, you might be far more eternal than your physical form. But even if this life is all there is, you've had the extraordinary privilege of being conscious, of experiencing wonder, of touching other lives with your presence. And here's something beautiful to carry with you. Tomorrow night, your brain will create dreams, taking you into realms that feel completely real while your body lies still. In dreams, you travel through impossible landscapes, meet people who exist only in consciousness, experience emotions and adventures that follow no physical laws. Dreams remind us every single night that consciousness is capable of realities far beyond what our waking minds consider possible. Speaking of dreams, in our next gentle exploration together, we'll journey into the science of sleep and dreams, that nightly mystery where consciousness transforms reality itself. We'll discover why we dream, what happens to your mind during those 8 hours of darkness, and how the science of sleep reveals profound truths about the nature of consciousness itself. Sleep well, fellow travelers. In consciousness, let these cosmic possibilities bring you comfort and deep rest. If tonight's exploration brought you a sense of wonder and peace, stay with us here at Solace Science. Each week, we journey together into the mysteries that connect science and soul, exploring not just the universe out there, but the infinite cosmos within each of us. Subscribe if you feel called to continue these gentle journeys into wonder, and let's keep exploring the beautiful mysteries that surround and inhabit us. Until next time, may your dreams be filled with stars and the quiet certainty that consciousness, in all its forms, is among the most extraordinary phenomena in the known universe. Maybe death is not an ending, but a transformation as natural as a wave returning to the ocean. And maybe, just maybe, that transformation is the most beautiful journey we'll ever take. Sweet dreams, and thank you for joining us on this gentle voyage into the great mystery we call existence.